Hi, I'm Patrick Palm, CEO and founder of Favro, and this is the Learn from Leaders podcast. The background to these interviews is that Favro clients are some of the most innovative and agile businesses out there. And it's used for collaborative planning by marketing teams, by product teams, HR, management teams. And what this means is that we get to know some truly inspiring people. So what we do in this podcast is that I invite them here for a conversation about something where they are true leaders, so we can all learn from it. Let's go. Super thanks for that you could join us today.
Oh, my pleasure.
And I think, to kind of kick off the conversation with you a bit, anyone who looked at your LinkedIn or your background, it's pretty impressive. But how do you get started? How did you get into the game industry in the first place? And then, what brought you to what you're doing today?
Yeah, I got in, I guess, at the time that I wanted to, right? So I spent 13 years, I think it was, roughly, like as a software engineer and program manager before I decided to go into games. And this was in Orlando, Florida, in the US. And, the only real game development studio there is Tiburon, which is part of EA, and they make some of the biggest games on the planet, of course. And for me, it was back in 2010. It was just really the right time. I'm an avid gamer, always wanted to get in games. An opportunity came up to be part of like a new team on Madden NFL. Part of new leadership team there. So it was just a great opportunity, and so I decided to make the leap in there at that time. But then,
when is this? What time is this?
This was back in 2010, so 10 years ago.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, and it was great. Like Madden was one of my favorite games. I mean, I bought that game every year for 15 straight years before I joined the team, so I was very familiar with it from a consumer standpoint. And just learning the ropes on how to drive production on a game team, especially one of that size with that complexity and that short of a development timeline, releasing every year. There were a lot of challenges in there that helped me both get up to speed quick, learn a lot, while at the same time bringing myself and my experiences to contribute, because a lot of it actually translated very well from outside of games. But yeah, then, from there, I spent, quite a few years with EA, working out of EA Montreal on mobile titles. Then I went to EA LA to work on a new mobile IP. I went, after some time at EA, then I went north to Seattle, where I joined Xbox for a bit, learning, how to work on console experiences, on console and off console. And then went back into AAA games, working at Bungie, where I was a project lead there, working on our game engine R&D, Destiny 2, all of like our live service infrastructure and stuff. So it was a great experience there, and then I just actually wrapped up my time at Turn 10 Studios, which I went to after Bungie, where I was the executive producer for Forza Horizon, and I moved back over into Xbox, joining Gaming for Everyone, driving product-led, product impacting inclusivity across all of gaming at Xbox.
All right, awesome. And these times that happen now with COVID, remote work. Can you just share the whole kind of picture of how that happened with you? I mean, how prepared were you? How much did you change? I mean, what's the whole story from your point of view with this?
Yeah, so we had I think it was back in late February, early March. We thought that maybe we might end up having to work remote, and yeah, we were definitely not prepared. I mean, my team, the Forza Horizon team at Turn 10 Studios, we work with so many partners. I mean, our primary partner is Playground Games in the UK. who do, a lot of the day-to-day development on Forza Horizon. But we work with other external partners as well who contribute to Forza Horizon, both the live program or new experiences that will are yet to be shipped. And for us, being a team that works with so many different studios like across the world, working remote for us would have been fine, but with our partners, we have to take that into consideration as well. Mm-hmm. But when we actually, happened to go remote, it was about mid-March. We actually were not prepared. We thought we were going to have an easy transition as a team, but we did not have an easy transition. You think you can be prepared, but you're not. I mean, for us, we all sat together, of course, like most teams. But that day-to-day constant interaction, face-to-face, being in meetings together, you lose that when you go remote, and then you have to figure out a different way to communicate. And virtual calls is one thing, but like you're just not used to going forth and having those ad hoc conversations that way. So we had to learn how to change the way we work, how to change the way our partners work, and as well, and to make sure that we were supporting our partners while also trying to figure out what we needed to do. So there was like a few things that we ended up instituting, with varying success, of course. While we were always trying new things. I think as a company, we had a thing called the COVID clock, where we wanted to schedule meetings that ended earlier than they would typically end, to make sure that people had the time to like transition to another meeting, whether that was get up from their home desk and either go to the restroom or get a snack or whatever have you, but just have like a 5 to 10 minute break in between. So we had to be very cognizant of making sure we were ending our meetings early. And then the other thing too was we changed the way that we start our meetings. So usually, when you're in person and you kick off a meeting, it's just immediately right to business. Let's get to the agenda. What are the topics? What are we getting through? And the one thing that we ended up doing was starting a meeting by just having like a casual conversation. It didn't matter who was in the meeting or what it was supposed to be about, or how well you knew the person. We would just have a casual conversation. How's family life? How are the kids? How are you doing? All that kind of stuff. And just to kind of like break the ice and get people into, a good state before we actually got into our agendas, which meant that we had to be really good about time management in our meetings, which is something that most companies, most people don't really do a good job of. And we had to get really good at that really fast. And then finally, like, a lot of the rituals that we had in person before, like, going out to lunch, and again, the hallway conversations, et cetera, we brought those in. It took a little bit of time, but we brought those in a virtual environment to make sure that we were still having those kinds of things, even though it was virtual. Mm-hmm. And even like the ad hoc conversations you would have, giving people the liberty to, think it's okay to actually reach out and just have a general casual conversation with somebody like you would in front of the coffee machine or whatever. So, and then the final thing that we did as a team that was big for us was we also changed the way that we organized our work. For this, actually, we used Favreau, and we were lucky to actually get Favreau on site, like right when COVID was starting, is when we actually started to use it in earnest. And it allowed us to not only organize much better as a team, to make sure that a lot of the stuff that we would talk about in person, how's this going, how's this progressing, it's just there now, and you don't have to waste time asking those conversations. But also for our partners, because we have our development partners that we worked with, but then we also have tons of other partners within Turn 10 or within Xbox that we partner with, that we have requirements for. Teams like licensing, partnerships, business management, franchise management, marketing, et cetera. And so we brought all of those teams along as well in our like Favreau journey, if you will, so that they could also provide the levels of transparency we needed, and that all cross dependencies were very transparent to everyone, and we can track progress on those things.
It's very interesting, this example, you're giving, because one of the things we very often talk about ourselves that we are trying to design for is breaking silos in big organizations. And what you're describing, is exactly that. And obviously, with COVID, those things are even harder. But I have this thought I want to try with you. Sometimes you need like an inflection point. Something needs to happen. Something bad needs to happen to shake up things. Do you think that that this all was a bit of that kind of inflection point, that where now that kind of made you make some steps that including Favreau that put you in a better place? So I'm a very optimistic person by nature, so I would like to think that there are positive things coming out of this crisis.
Yeah, I think for us it was kind of an interesting journey, because like I said, we were a very close-knit team. We were used to working together both in proximity and being very close as well from an individual standpoint. Most of the team had been together for a long time, almost since the beginning of Forza Horizon, 8 to 10 years ago. And so when we first started to work remotely, everyone, almost on a daily basis, you could talk to anyone and they would be like, well, man, I can't wait to get back into the office. I miss seeing you guys. I miss, the hallway conversations, all that stuff. And they were not as productive as they could be. And as a result, they were also working longer hours as well. And, fast forward, after making a lot of changes, a few months later, and the tone changed a lot. Once we figured out how to work remote, and that, as challenging as it is, of course, making AAA games is very difficult, but it is possible to do it remote and to do it successful, despite the challenges. The tone changed a lot. I think, now several people that I was talking to on a daily basis, they don't ever want to go back into an office, and for us, we don't have to go back for quite some time. Still, we don't know when, but it's still seems way off. But even when the doors open back up, people are like, well, you know what, we can actually do this remotely. What are we going to do about that? Well, when it's time to go back in the office, can I stay working remote? I want to stay working remote. Is there going to be flexibility where I can work half the time remote, et cetera? So I think it's a big shift and an inflection point for not just obviously the games industry, but probably all industries. I know I have several friends of mine that work for companies like Twitter and Oracle. They're never going back. And as a result, too, they're also moving from the expensive cities that they live in, to more affordable cities.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, we ourselves are remote first, and we will still have offices, but they will serve as kind of hubs where, we want to schedule kind of like a get together. We do that and we meet up. And, there might be some people that prefer to, or it's more practical to work out of the office, but making, let's say, the norm remote, I think is a good thing, because then if that's your starting point and that's the norm, it makes everything easier, because then whoever is remote doesn't feel like it's a half version of what you really wanted to do. This is the real thing. And then when you decide you're going to get together, you will cherish it more because it might have a bigger social dimension, and you use that for those situations. It's interesting. Many of the things that you talked about now are touching upon company culture and how to do that now remote and so forth. But when we talk about company culture, there's also other things going on in society. We had a very good webinar earlier this summer with Lina at Bonfire. We had a great talk about inclusion when it comes to diversity, and you're also talking, doing a lot of work around inclusion. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So, well, first, I back in on July 1st, I became co-lead for Xbox Latinx, which is part of one of the Gaming for Everyone communities at Xbox. And then recently, as I mentioned earlier, I shifted away outside of game production, which I love game production, but shifted away from the studios to join the Gaming for Everyone team as a principal program manager for product-led inclusivity. So specifically product-led, because from a cultural standpoint, there's a lot of things various companies do. Microsoft and Xbox are no different to try to bring in a more diverse workforce, and then doing a lot of the work to make them feel included, right? To build that community within the company. And Microsoft does an amazing job of that. The one, I think, big gap that is in games, it's basically in any industry, but in games especially, you can see it, and it is talked about a lot, is inclusivity in your product, in the game itself. So that boils down to things like representation or accessibility, etc. And that's my job. So I came to this team to work with all the leaders inside of Xbox to help them with their inclusive growth strategies, and then also work on my own project as well. Hopefully to redefine the game industry. Maybe we'll see if I get lucky to help drive inclusivity in the games. So yeah, that's in a nutshell the work that I've been doing more recently. And then there's a lot to come. A lot of it, of course, is Latinx focused, since again I'm co-lead of that. But we have Hispanic Heritage Month coming from mid-September to mid-October. My team, my group is working very closely with several other groups external to Xbox to celebrate that month and bring awareness to it. But yeah, and then outside of that, my journey over the years, especially as being Hispanic male in games, especially in senior and leadership levels, I'm usually like the only one. And so I take that platform, if you will, as an opportunity within the studios and companies that I work in to help drive and promote more diversity and inclusivity, within those studios. Really, like at a leadership level, though, because most companies, they try to do a good job, and some of them do, of driving inclusive diversity, at the new hire level, from like college students, that kind of thing. But not as good at the leadership levels. That's the area that I'm definitely most passionate about.
Awesome. And to kind of go back to the conversation we had there in the previous webinar with Lina, we also talked about the fact that if you look at the demographics today of who's playing our games, it's very, very diverse, and that should be reflected.
Definitely.
It's right for so many reasons. It's right for moral reasons. It's right for business reasons. It's just right.
Yeah, a lot of the biggest game companies, of course, are very like U.S. and Western Europe focused, right? And so we tend to make games that reflect what our realities, the areas that we live in. And sometimes when we try to represent other regions of the world, we don't always do a very good job, and that's where the inclusivity part needs a lot of work. We don't always do a very good job, and there's lots of opportunity for us to continue to grow and get better in that area, because gaming is not like a just Western Europe, US, Canada, and East Asia thing. It's a global thing. There's over 2 billion gamers on the planet, and we need to be able to reach all of them and make them all feel included.
Speaking about that, I have to ask you something. I read this report recently that today in the game industry is bigger than the music and film industry combined. Did you expect that 10 years ago?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Hmm?
I expected that even way before I got into games, back
Uh-huh.
in the early 2000s. Just the trajectory, right? Like, I think it was, I mean, this was back in 97, I want to say, maybe it was 96, when Final Fantasy VII first came out on the PlayStation 1. Just, when you play through that game, and at the time, looking back, it obviously looks very dated, but at the time, it was just mind blowing. Just the cinematic quality of it, the storytelling, and yeah, when I saw that at that point in time, I was like, wow. At some point, this is going to be what most people do. They're not going to spend money going to a theater and watching a movie. They're going to want to play the movie,
Mhm.
and yeah, we're definitely at that point.
Mhm. I had this interesting thing the other week. I was just gonna eat something in front of the TV. I was just turning on my Apple TV, and I'm like, okay, gonna see something on Netflix. I was like, nah, I'm gonna see this whole launch event thing for the new Call of Duty game. Like, I would not have picked that some years ago. And I was like, no, I'm actually more interested in that. So
Yeah,
it really have changed. And it's really interesting when I speak with. Friends that are my age or older and are not entirely in with this, and they're like, not all of them are getting it. And then I speak with some of my friends are, let's say, a little bit younger than me, so it's still, reasonably old. I would like to point out, but they're like, yeah, of course. I think that there's a great documentary on Netflix. I think it's called Top Score.
yep.
That I think does a really good job at kind of giving the whole background, how we got here. I think when you're in the industry, most of these documentaries feel a little bit too shallow, but I think that one was really good actually.
That one was very well done. Yeah. And I'm with you too. I catch myself just finding more and more time spending consuming, video game streams, news, or just watching people stream things. Actually, even whether they're video games or not. Like, one of my favorite categories in Twitch is the just chatting category. And I like to just pop in there from time to time, almost every day now, and just see what's up, what's on there, especially ones that are from other countries, other languages. I don't know what's going on, but everyone seems to be having a good time. And a lot of times they're also playing games. They're just not focused on showing the game on screen. And yeah, I feel, I don't know, it's just more connected doing that than like, just sitting down and watching a 2-hour movie, which I still do that a lot, but not as much anymore.
Awesome. And I have to take this opportunity to ask you, since we ourselves are in the tools part of the industry, and some that are watching might also be in that industry, or doing a start, which is in tools or middleware. Since your background is in production, I mean, obviously you have been someone who spent a lot of time looking at tools. What was your view on what makes a good tool vendor or middleware vendor, for companies like us and others that are in that part of the industry? What do you think is important to be good?
Yeah. Well, first I'll say I'm going to answer it from a game production standpoint, more than anything, because what I noticed when I got into games was the tools that I was used to using, that I loved, they were not as applicable when I got into games. They're basically a tool that's kind of like in a box, and that's it. You just use it, an agile tool, let's say, and it didn't really translate well into the complexity within game production, with all the disciplines and different pipelines and workflows that we end up using. And so, for me, having a tool that is built from the ground up, understanding the realities behind game production is the most important thing, first and foremost for me. And there are very, very few companies that do this. And then from there, the next most important thing is being able to work with the tool vendor, tool developer, to continue to iterate on it, and help them grow, in essence, providing features that you need, functionality that you need in order to be successful, that I'm sure other studios would also need as well. But being able to influence, in essence, what's on that backlog, what's on that roadmap, is definitely extremely important, I think, because the games industry is always evolving. How we do things is always evolving, and we need somebody to grow along with us at the pace that we grow.
Awesome, thanks.
I hope you enjoyed that interview. I certainly did. If you want to elevate yourself as a modern leader and help your teams become even more successful, then check out Favor Academy at favro.com. There you will find podcasts, webinars, articles, all free of charge. Check it out.